So we're tying skirts, and people have been asking to do a video on hand tying skirts, so that's what I'm going to show you today. This is basically a vise. I think I picked this up at Fish Boss or Lurecraft or Jan's Net Craft, one of those places. They're pretty inexpensive. I think this one was probably 10 or 20 bucks. I don't know. Basically, what you need skirt tabs. You need the vise to hold the jig, so that way you have two hands free. I use wire. Some people use thread. It's whatever your preference is, but I just find wire is a little bit easy to use for me. So what I do here, cut a piece of wire off. This thing has a nice little cutter on it. It's about 2 inches long, and then I make the shoehorn or the U here to hold the skirts. So once I do that, I take 2 skirt tabs, and then something I've just been playing around with lately is it's kind of a trend with several jig manufacturers now, is taking an accent, making some antennas. And what I'll do is I'll just take 2 or 3 strands off a brighter color skirt tab, and I'll cut them away from the rest of the tab, keeping the tab ends on there for me. Alright, so then what I have is I've got my 2 skirts hanging in the wire here, and then I've got an extra one that I'm going to use as antenna that I'm going to put kind of under here like this. You got to kind of hold it in place, because as you can see, I've got it a lot longer, because I'm just putting I've got this folded in half, and then I've got this just at the tip here. So I'm going to feed it underneath the weed guard and around the collar, my little U wire form. And then I'm going to begin to wrap it around both directions. And you got to kind of keep the skirt out of the way as you do this. That's just part of it. And you want to be able to twist them both around in opposite directions until they come back and cross each other again. Now once I get to that point, and I've got it, make sure I got it on the skirt collar here, I'm going to take it out of the vise. So now what I've got it around there twice, and I've got it, these are crossed, and then I'm going to twist them once. That just kind of holds everything in place. Then I'm going to take a pair of pliers, and I'm going to finish twisting this. And what you want to do, you want to think about twisting towards where the wires are around the collar, and what that does is kind of cinch it all down. Now if you give it a twist or two, go ahead and go back to your skirt tabs and make sure they're worked around, covering the whole neck of the jig, because you had them just on the back side. You need to work them around now and make sure they're kind of spread evenly around the jig. You got to kind of pull them, then go ahead and twist them down the rest of the way, tighten them down real good. Once I've got done that, I'm going to cut some of the excess wire off, but not all of it. And then I'm going to take my pliers, and I'm just going to bend that wire down around the shank back into the skirt kind of. Alright, then I just take my scissors, cut my tabs off. Careful not to cut your antenna off. We went to all that trouble to put them on there. Alright, so I've cut the 4 tabs. Got a little too much antenna up here on the collar. I'm going to cut it off too. There we go. Pretty good jig for just a few minutes of work there. Now the reason I hand tie, people ask, well, why even bother? Why not just use the rubber collars? And for the most part, you know what? I use the rubber collars because I lose a lot of jigs. I fish real rocky stuff. So my thinking is I'm not going to have the jigs long enough. But one thing I do a lot with a jig, especially on ledges, is I rip it. And sometimes your skirts can get jacked up from doing that a bunch. So I like to tie it. If you swim a jig a lot, tying it will keep the bass, because that thing's moving so fast, the bass will grab the skirt sometimes and just pull it right off the jig. So there you can see our antennas hanging down out of our skirt. Then you can play around with getting it squished around and even so it all looks good and even all the way around the jig. But that didn't take very long, but it does take a lot longer than just using a rubber collar, so keep that in mind. But that's basically your finished product. We can look under here and you can see the wire tie there. So got it pushed down in here. You don't want that thing poking out where it might poke a fish when they go to bite down on the jig, so it'll alert them that something's not right. So make sure you bend that wire down and get it out of the way. But that's been our wire tying video.